The Duke sent away the girl he called plain. Years later, she's the only woman he can't have. They say a man never forgets his first mistake. For Alaric Devereux, the Duke of Ashford, that mistake had a name: Seraphine Caldwell. The girl he dismissed with a single word. The girl he sent away without a second glance. The girl he called plain. But 5 years have a way of rewriting the rules. She returned to London not as the forgotten wallflower he once knew, but as a woman who no longer needed his approval. A woman who had learned to live without him. A woman who became the one thing he could never have again. This is a story of regret, of longing, of a love that was destroyed by pride and rebuilt by something far more dangerous. If you love slow-burn romance, forbidden desire, and second chances that cut deeper than the first, subscribe now and comment where you're watching from. You won't want to miss a single moment. London, 1812, Ashford Manor, late evening. The rain came down in sheets that night, turning the cobblestones of Mayfair into rivers of black glass. Inside Ashford Manor, the drawing room glowed with firelight, warm, golden, deceptive in its comfort. Alaric Devereux sat in the leather chair that had once been his father's, a glass of brandy balanced on the armrest, and tried very hard not to think about the fact that he was now the Duke of Ashford. 6 months. It had been 6 months since his father's death, and the title still felt like a coat that didn't quite fit, too heavy, too suffocating, too permanent. He was 23 years old, and he had inherited an empire, 12 estates, a seat in Parliament, debts he was still discovering, and expectations that pressed down on him like the weight of the sky. And his mother, the Dowager Duchess, had very specific ideas about how he should shoulder that weight. "Lady Isolde Harrington," she said for the 3rd time that evening, her voice clipped and precise as a blade. She sat across from him, spine rigid, hands folded in her lap like a judge delivering a verdict. "She has breeding, beauty, and a dowry that would solve half our financial troubles." Alaric took a slow sip of brandy and said nothing. "Are you listening to me, Alaric?" "Every word, Mother." "Then why do you look as though you're contemplating throwing yourself into the Thames?" Because he was. Not literally, but the idea of spending the rest of his life married to Lady Isolde Harrington, a woman who smiled on command and had never said an interesting thing in her life, made him want to do something drastic. "Lady Isolde is lovely," Alaric said carefully, "but she's also about as interesting as wallpaper. Marriage is not about interest, Alaric. It is about legacy, duty, alliances." His mother's eyes narrowed. "Your father understood that. And look how happy he was." The words came out sharper than he'd intended. His mother's expression went cold. "Your father did his duty, as you will do yours." Alaric set down his glass with more force than necessary. "I'm not marrying someone just because she has the right bloodline and a large dowry. I'd rather—" He cut himself off. What would he rather? He didn't know. That was the problem. He didn't know what he wanted. Only what he didn't. Before his mother could respond, there was a knock at the door. "Enter," the dowager said, her tone still icy. The butler stepped inside, his expression carefully neutral in the way that servants perfected when delivering news they suspected would be unwelcome. "Your Grace," he said, addressing the dowager, "Miss Caldwell has arrived." Alaric frowned. "Who?" "Miss Seraphine Caldwell," the butler clarified, turning to him. "The ward of the late Lord Pembroke. As per the late Duke's arrangement, she is to stay with the family for the season." Alaric blinked. He had a vague memory of his father mentioning something about this, a favor owed to an old friend, a distant family connection, a girl who needed a place in society because she had nowhere else to go. He hadn't thought about it since. There had been too many other things to think about: estates to manage, servants to pay, creditors to appease, a title he hadn't wanted, and a future he couldn't escape. Ah, yes. His mother's expression shifted into something that might have been approval if it weren't so cold. "I had forgotten. Very well, show her in." Alaric reached for his brandy again. Another obligation, another responsibility, another person expecting something from him. Perfect. The girl who entered the drawing room was small. That was Alaric's first thought. Not delicate, not fragile, just small. Like she'd learned to take up as little space as possible. She wore a traveling dress of pale grey wool that looked like it had been made for someone else, too loose in the shoulders, too long in the sleeves. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple knot, damp from the rain, with a few stubborn curls escaping to frame her face. Her face. Alaric studied her as she stood in the doorway, her hands clasped in front of her, her posture perfect but somehow defensive. She wasn't beautiful, not in the way London defined beauty. No golden curls, no porcelain skin, no rosebud lips or delicate features. Her face was too angular, her eyebrows too dark and too strong, her mouth too wide. But her eyes were extraordinary, large and dark and intensely watchful, like she saw everything and missed nothing. Like she'd learned early to read a room before entering it. They were the eyes of someone who had been hurt before and had decided never to be caught off guard again. She met his gaze directly, just for a moment, and Alaric felt something flicker in his chest. Curiosity, maybe, or recognition. The look of someone who understood what it meant to wear a mask. Then she dropped into a curtsy, and the moment was gone. "Your Grace," she said, addressing his mother first. Her voice was soft but steady, with a faint accent he couldn't quite place. "Thank you for receiving me. I am deeply grateful for your hospitality." The dowager waved a dismissive hand, as if Seraphine's gratitude was irrelevant. "We are honoring your late guardian's wishes, Miss Caldwell, nothing more." She gestured impatiently. "Come here, let me look at you." Seraphine stepped forward. She moved carefully, Alaric noticed. Not timidly, but deliberately. Like someone who had learned that sudden movements attracted unwanted attention. The dowager circled her once, her sharp eyes cataloguing every detail with the efficiency of a general inspecting troops. Alaric watched his mother's expression shift from neutral to faintly displeased. He knew what was coming. "Plain," the dowager announced, as if diagnosing an illness. "But not hopeless. We can work with this." Alaric saw it. The smallest flinch. Not in Seraphine's face. That remained perfectly composed, but in her hands. Her fingers tightened just slightly against her skirt, the knuckles going white for half a second before she forced them to relax. She'd heard that word before. Many times, probably. "She'll need better dresses," his mother continued, circling Seraphine like a predator. "And something done with that hair. Do you own a brush, girl?" "I do, Your Grace." "Then I suggest you use it." "You look like you've been dragged through a hedge." "I apologize. The rain—" "I don't want excuses. I want improvement." The dowager turned to Alaric. "What do you think? Can we make something of her?" Alaric wanted to say no, not because it was true, but because he hated this. The casual cruelty. The way his mother reduced people to their usefulness. The way she looked at this girl, this stranger who had just lost her guardian and probably had nowhere else to go, and saw only a problem to be managed. But he was tired. Tired of fighting with his mother. Tired of trying to be better than his father. Tired of pretending he knew what he was doing. So he glanced at Seraphine Caldwell, standing in the center of the room with her spine straight, and her hands clenched, and her eyes carefully empty. And he said the word that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Plain. His voice was flat, disinterested, final. "But I suppose that's not a crime." He picked up his brandy glass and took another sip, already dismissing her, already forgetting her. He didn't see the way her jaw tightened, didn't see the way her eyes went very still, didn't see the moment something inside her died. The dowager dismissed Seraphine shortly after. "Mrs. Henley will show you to your room," she said, her tone making it clear that the conversation was over. "We dine at 8. Do try to make yourself presentable." "Yes, Your Grace." Seraphine curtsied again, perfectly, mechanically, and turned toward the door. Alaric didn't watch her leave. He was already thinking about other things. The estates. The debts. The letter from his steward that needed a response. He finished his brandy and stood. "I have work to do," he said to his mother. Alaric, "Good night, Mother." He left the drawing room without looking back, and upstairs, in a small, cold bedroom that smelled of dust and disuse, Seraphine Caldwell sat on the edge of a narrow bed and stared at her reflection in the tarnished mirror across the room. Plain. The word echoed in her mind like a bell. Plain. She'd heard it before. From her late guardian's wife, who had made it clear that Seraphine's presence was tolerated, not welcomed. From the other girls at the academy where she'd been sent, who had whispered it behind their hands. From the world at large, which had very specific ideas about what a woman should be. And Seraphine Caldwell was none of those things, but hearing it from him, from the Duke of Ashford, with his storm-grey eyes and his perfect face and his air of untouchable elegance. That hurt in a way she hadn't expected. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself she'd heard worse. She told herself she didn't care what he thought. But when she finally lay down in the narrow bed, still wearing her damp dress because no one had thought to send a maid to help her undress, she stared at the ceiling and felt something crack open inside her chest. She didn't cry. She never cried. Instead, she made a decision. She would leave. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but soon. She would leave this house and this city and this man who looked at her and saw nothing worth keeping. She would leave, and she would build a life where she didn't need anyone's approval, where she could be enough, just as she was. 3 days later, Ashford Manor. Seraphine learned quickly that invisibility was a skill, not the kind found in fairy tales, no magic cloaks or enchanted rings, but the kind that came from understanding the rhythms of a house. From knowing when to appear and when to disappear, from reading the moods of the people who held your fate in their hands. She had been practicing this skill her entire life. At Lord Pembroke's estate, she had learned to be present at meals, but silent unless spoken to occupy the corners of rooms, to make herself useful enough to be kept but not so visible as to be noticed. It was exhausting, but it was survival. Ashford Manor was no different. The house was enormous, a sprawling monument to old money and older pride. Marble floors that echoed with every footstep, corridors lined with portraits of dead Devereux, all of them looking down with the same cold grey eyes. Rooms so vast that Seraphine felt like a mouse scurrying through a cathedral. She woke early each morning, before the servants, before the sun, and dressed herself in one of the 3 dresses she owned, all of them grey or brown, all of them slightly too large, handed down from someone who had pitied her enough to give them away, but not enough to have them tailored. She breakfasted alone in her room, not because she wanted to, but because the Dowager had made it clear that Seraphine's presence at the family table was optional. Translation: unwelcome. She spent her mornings in the library, the one place in the house where she felt like she could breathe. It was a beautiful room, 2 stories tall, with floor-to-ceiling shelves stuffed with leather-bound volumes, a fireplace large enough to stand in, windows that overlooked the gardens, where roses bloomed in shades of cream and blush and blood red. Seraphine loved it immediately. Books didn't judge. Books didn't call you plain. Books didn't look through you like you were made of glass. She would curl up in the window seat with a volume of poetry or history, and for a few hours she could forget where she was. Forget that she was a charity case. Forget the word that had branded itself into her mind, plain. The Duke, Alaric, though she would never call him that aloud, rarely appeared. She saw him occasionally, passing in corridors, leaving the study with documents tucked under his arm and exhaustion carved into his face. Once she glimpsed him through the library window, riding across the grounds on a black horse, his coat billowing behind him like wings. He never looked at her. Not once. It was as if she didn't exist. And Seraphine told herself that was fine, better than fine. She didn't want his attention. She didn't need it. But sometimes, late at night, when sleep wouldn't come, she would remember the way he'd looked at her that first night, not with cruelty, not with interest, with nothing. And that was worse than anything. 1 week later, the drawing room. The Dowager summoned Seraphine on a grey Thursday afternoon. "Sit," the older woman commanded, gesturing to a chair across from her. Seraphine sat. The Dowager studied her with the same expression she might give a horse she was considering purchasing. Assessing, calculating. "You've been here a week," the Dowager said finally. "Yes, Your Grace. And in that week you have made yourself remarkably absent." Seraphine kept her face carefully neutral. I didn't wish to intrude. Intrude? The dowager's eyebrow arched. You are a guest in this house, Miss Caldwell. Guests do not hide in libraries like frightened mice. I'm not a guest, Seraphine thought. I'm an obligation. But she said nothing. I have been considering your situation, the dowager continued. You are 18, unmarried, with no family, no fortune, and no prospects. In short, you are a problem. Seraphine's hands tightened in her lap. However, the dowager said, her tone shifting slightly, you are also my late husband's responsibility. And I will not have it said that the Devereux family shirks its duties, so we will find you a husband. Seraphine's stomach dropped. A husband, Your Grace? Yes, nothing grand, of course. You haven't the looks or the dowry for that. But there are men, second sons, widowers, minor gentry, who might be persuaded to overlook your limitations in exchange for a connection to this family. Limitations. The word hung in the air like smoke. I see, Seraphine said quietly. You will attend the season. You will be presented at balls and dinners. You will smile and be agreeable and do everything in your power to secure an offer before summer's end. And if I don't? The dowager's smile was thin and sharp. Then you will need to find employment, a governess perhaps, or a companion to some elderly widow. I hear there are positions available in the north. Translation: you will be thrown out. Seraphine felt something cold and heavy settle in her chest. She had known this was coming. Of course she had. She was a burden, a problem to be solved, and the Dowager Duchess of Ashford did not tolerate unsolved problems. I understand, Your Grace, Seraphine said. Good. We begin tomorrow. I've arranged for a modiste to call. You'll need new dresses. Something that doesn't make you look like a Quaker. Yes, Your Grace. You may go. Seraphine stood, curtsied, and left the room with her spine straight and her hands steady. It wasn't until she reached the safety of her bedroom that she let herself feel it, the humiliation, the fear, the crushing weight of being unwanted. She sank onto the edge of her bed and pressed her hands to her face. I can't do this. The thought came unbidden, desperate. I can't stand here and smile and pretend to be grateful while they auction me off to the highest bidder. I can't spend the rest of my life being someone's obligation. But what choice did she have? She had no money, no family, no skills beyond reading Latin and playing the pianoforte poorly. She was trapped. 2 weeks later, the first ball. The modiste had done her best. Seraphine stood in front of the mirror in her new gown, a pale ivory silk with delicate embroidery at the hem, and barely recognized herself. The dress was beautiful, far more beautiful than anything she'd ever worn. But it didn't change what she saw in the mirror. The same angular face, the same 2 large eyes. The same dark, unruly hair that the maid had wrestled into submission with enough pins to build a fence. Plain. She heard the word in the Duke's voice, flat and final. But I suppose that's not a crime. Seraphine took a breath and forced herself to stand straighter. It didn't matter what he thought, it didn't matter what anyone thought. She would survive this. She had survived worse. The ball was at the home of Lady Beatrice Ashworth, a wealthy widow with more money than taste, and a love of gossip that bordered on obsession. The ballroom was a crush of silk and jewels and perfume so thick it made Seraphine's eyes water. Chandeliers dripped light from the ceiling. An orchestra played in the corner. Couples swirled across the floor in a dizzying blur of color. Seraphine stood near the wall and tried to disappear. It didn't work. The Dowager had made sure of that. Miss Caldwell, may I present Lord Percival Hargrave? He is a Viscount. Lord Hargrave was 60 if he was a day. He had 3 chins and breath that smelled of onions. He looked at Seraphine the way a man might look at a piece of livestock. Charmed, he wheezed. Seraphine curtsied and said nothing. Miss Caldwell is a distant relation of my late husband, the Dowager explained smoothly. She has recently come to stay with us for the season. Ah, a poor relation then. Distant, the Dowager corrected, her smile tight. Same thing. Lord Hargrave turned to Seraphine. Can you dance, girl? Yes, my lord. Can you cook? I beg your pardon? Cook. Can you cook? My last wife couldn't. Useless woman. Spent all my money on dresses and died anyway. Seraphine stared at him. The dowager cleared her throat. Perhaps we should... I like a woman who can cook, Lord Hargrave continued, oblivious, and one who doesn't talk too much. You don't talk too much, do you? Good, good. We'll speak later. He wandered off, leaving Seraphine standing there, her face burning. The dowager sighed. Well, he's not ideal, but he has a title and an estate in Yorkshire. You could do worse. Could I? Seraphine thought wildly. The evening dragged on. Seraphine was introduced to a parade of men, each more unsuitable than the last. A widower with 7 children who needed a governess more than a wife. A minor baronet who spent the entire conversation complaining about the cost of maintaining his crumbling estate. A third son who stared at her chest and asked if she had any experience with household management. She smiled. She curtsied. She said all the right things, and inside she felt herself fracturing. She was standing near the terrace doors, desperate for air, when she saw him. Alaric. He stood on the far side of the ballroom, surrounded by a group of men in dark coats. He was laughing at something someone said, his head tilted back, his face relaxed in a way she'd never seen before. He looked happy, unburdened, free. Seraphine felt something twist in her chest. He hadn't spoken to her once since that first night, hadn't asked how she was settling in, hadn't acknowledged her presence at all. And why would he? She was nothing to him, less than nothing. A problem his mother had to solve. As if sensing her gaze, Alaric looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom. For one breathless moment, Seraphine hoped that he might come over, might say something, might see her. But then his gaze slid past her, as if she were part of the wallpaper, and he turned back to his friends. Seraphine felt something inside her shatter. She didn't wait for the dowager, didn't make excuses. She simply walked out of the ballroom, through the entrance hall, and out into the night. The air outside was cold and sharp and blessedly clean. Seraphine stood on the steps of Lady Ashworth's townhouse, her arms wrapped around herself, and let herself feel it. All of it. The humiliation, the rejection, the crushing, unbearable loneliness. She had spent her entire life being unwanted. Her parents had died and left her with nothing. Lord Pembroke had taken her in out of duty, not love. His wife had made it clear every day that Seraphine was a burden. And now the Dowager Duchess was parading her in front of men who saw her as a commodity, a problem to be solved, a placeholder. And the Duke, Alaric, didn't see her at all. Plain. The word echoed in her mind. You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. No, Seraphine whispered into the dark. Her voice was shaking, but it was hers. No, she said again, louder this time. She wouldn't do this. She wouldn't spend the rest of her life begging for scraps of approval from people who would never see her as anything more than an inconvenience. She would leave. She would find a way, and she would never, ever come back. Ashford Manor, 3 days after the ball. Seraphine woke before dawn, not because she wanted to, but because sleep had become impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lord Hargrave's jowls, heard the Dowager's cold voice cataloguing her limitations, felt the weight of Alaric's indifference like a stone on her chest. So she lay in the dark, watching the ceiling fade from black to grey to pale gold as the sun crept over the horizon, and she planned. Leaving would not be easy. She had no money, only a few coins left from the small allowance Lord Pembroke had given her years ago. She had no references for employment, no family to take her in, no friends who might offer shelter. She had nothing but her determination and a borrowed trunk. But that would have to be enough. The library became her sanctuary and her war room. While the rest of the house slept or went about their morning routines, Seraphine sat in the window seat with a stack of newspapers and periodicals, searching for anything that might offer a path forward. Governess wanted for family in Hampshire. Must have French and pianoforte. She could do French. Her pianoforte was passable at best, but she could lie. Companions sought for elderly lady in Bath. References required. She didn't have references, but perhaps she could forge one. Lord Pembroke was dead. His wife wouldn't care enough to verify. Passage to America. Reasonable rates for those seeking new opportunities. America. The word pulled at something in her chest. A country where no one knew her, where she could be anyone, where the weight of her past wouldn't follow her like a shadow. But passage cost money, more money than she had. She folded the newspaper carefully and set it aside. One step at a time. First, she needed to find employment, anything that would get her out of this house and away from the dowager's plans. Then she could save, plan, disappear. The library. Late morning Seraphine was so absorbed in her reading that she didn't hear the door open. "I thought I might find you here." She looked up sharply. Alaric stood in the doorway. He wore riding clothes, dark trousers tucked into tall boots, a white shirt open at the collar, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked like he'd just come in from the stables. There was color in his cheeks from the wind, and his eyes, those storm-grey eyes, were brighter than she'd seen them. He looked alive, and he was looking at her. Actually looking at her. Seraphine's heart did something traitorous in her chest. She stood quickly, smoothing her skirt. "Your Grace, I apologize. I didn't mean to intrude." "It's a library," Alaric said, stepping inside. "You're hardly intruding by reading." He crossed to the shelves, running his fingers along the spines of books with the casual familiarity of someone who knew exactly where everything was. Seraphine stood frozen, unsure whether to leave or stay. "I'm looking for a book on Roman military strategy," Alaric said, not looking at her. "Have you seen it? Leather-bound, red spine, Vegetius, I think." "Third shelf," Seraphine said before she could stop herself. "Near the window, next to Plutarch." Alaric turned to look at her, one eyebrow raised. "You've catalogued my library?" "No, I've been reading. I noticed where things were." He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he walked to the shelf she'd indicated and pulled out the book. "You were right," he said, sounding faintly surprised. Seraphine said nothing. Alaric turned the book over in his hands, then glanced at the window seat where she'd been sitting, at the newspapers scattered across the cushions. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Looking for something?" he asked. "No." The lie came too quickly. "Just reading. Employment listings?" Seraphine's stomach dropped. She'd left one of the pages open, the one advertising for a governess position. "I was curious," she said carefully. "Curious." Alaric set the book down on a nearby table and crossed his arms. "About what?" "About opportunities." "Opportunities?" He repeated the word like he was tasting it, testing it. "What kind of opportunities?" Seraphine lifted her chin. "The kind that don't involve being married off to the highest bidder." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. For a moment, Alaric just stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression. Not quite guilt, but close. "My mother," he said finally. "Yes. She's been introducing you. To every unsuitable man in London, yes." "I see. Do you?" Seraphine's voice was shaking now, all her careful control cracking. "Do you see what it's like to stand in a ballroom and be inspected like livestock? To be told your entire worth depends on whether some widower with bad breath thinks you might be useful?" Alaric's jaw tightened. "I didn't realize—" "No, you didn't." Seraphine picked up the newspapers and clutched them to her chest like armor. "Because you don't see me at all." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" She met his gaze directly. "You've walked past me a dozen times in the past 2 weeks. You've never once asked how I'm faring. You've never acknowledged my existence except to call me plain. I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." Her voice cracked. "You looked at me and decided I wasn't worth your time, that I was just another obligation, another problem for your mother to solve, and you were right. I am a problem, but I won't be yours anymore." She moved toward the door. "Wait." Alaric's voice stopped her. "Where will you go?" "Anywhere but here." "Seraphine, don't." She turned back and there were tears on her face now, real tears. "Don't say my name like you care. You don't get to do that." "I do care." "Liar." The word hung between them. Alaric took a step forward. "I'm not—" But Seraphine was already gone. Seraphine's bedroom, that night she packed by candlelight. It didn't take long, she didn't have much. 3 dresses, 2 chemises, a single pair of worn shoes. A book of poetry Lord Pembroke had given her years ago, the only thing she owned that felt like hers. She folded everything carefully and placed it in the trunk at the foot of her bed. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from something else, something that felt like relief mixed with terror. She was really doing this, leaving, no plan, no destination, no guarantee of safety, just the desperate, bone-deep need to be somewhere, anywhere else. She sat on the edge of her bed and took a breath. Then another. You can do this, she told herself. You've survived worse, had she? She wasn't sure anymore. There was a knock at the door. Seraphine froze. It was late, well past midnight. No one should be awake. No one should be knocking on her door. Miss Caldwell? Her heart stopped. It was him. Alaric. Miss Caldwell, I know you're awake. I can see the light under your door. Seraphine stood slowly and crossed to the door. She pressed her palm against the wood as if she could feel him on the other side. Go away, she said. Not until you talk to me. There's nothing to talk about. I think there is. Seraphine closed her eyes. Your Grace. Alaric. His voice was quieter now, almost vulnerable. My name is Alaric, and I think I owe you an apology. She opened the door. He stood in the hallway, still in his riding clothes, his hair a mess, his expression strained. He looked tired. No, not tired. Haunted. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. Seraphine laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. And yet you did. I know. He dragged a hand through his hair. I know, and I'm sorry. I am an arrogant duke who thinks the world revolves around him. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Yes, that. Then we agree. Seraphine, don't. She stepped back. Don't apologize because you feel guilty. I don't need your pity. It's not pity. Then what is it? I don't know. He sounded genuinely confused, lost. I saw you in the library today and I realized I've been walking through this house like a ghost. I've been so focused on estates and debts and responsibilities that I haven't noticed anyone else exists. Yes. At least he was honest. That's not my problem, Seraphine said. I know, but I want it to be. What? Alaric stepped closer. I want to know you. I want to see you, really see you. Why? The question came out raw. Desperate. Why now? Why not 2 weeks ago when I first arrived? Why not at the ball when I was standing there drowning and you looked right through me? Because I was a fool. His voice cracked. Because I was so wrapped up in my own misery that I didn't see yours, and I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Seraphine felt something crack open in her chest. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But she'd been hurt too many times, dismissed too many times. I'm leaving, she said quietly. What? Tomorrow, I'm leaving. I've already packed. Alaric stared at her. Where will you go? I don't know, but anywhere is better than here. You don't have any money. I'll manage. Seraphine, you can't just... Yes, I can. She lifted her chin. I've been taking care of myself my entire life. I don't need your help. I don't need anyone's help. That's not true, isn't it? Her voice was shaking now. Look at me, Alaric. Really look at me. I'm plain. I'm poor, I'm nobody, I have nothing to offer anyone, and I'm tired of pretending that's fine. I'm tired of standing in corners and being invisible. I'm tired of waiting for someone to see me and deciding I'm worth something. You are worth something. To who? You. You didn't even know I existed until today. I know. His voice was rough, and I hate myself for that. But I'm here now. I'm seeing you now. It's too late. Is it? Seraphine looked at him. Really looked at him. At the guilt etched into his face, the exhaustion in his eyes, the way his hands clenched at his sides like he was fighting the urge to reach for her. He looked broken, just like her. Yes, she whispered. It is. And she closed the door. The next morning, before dawn, Seraphine left the way she'd arrived, quietly, invisibly. She dressed in her plainest dress, pinned her hair under a simple bonnet, and carried her trunk down the servants' stairs while the house still slept. No one stopped her. No one saw her. She reached the front door just as the sky began to lighten, pale grey bleeding into gold. Her hand was on the latch when she heard it. Footsteps. She turned. Alaric stood at the top of the stairs. He was fully dressed, coat, boots, as if he'd been waiting, as if he'd known. "Don't," he said. Seraphine's throat tightened. "I have to." "Why?" "Because if I stay here, I'll disappear. I'll become what everyone expects me to be. Quiet, grateful, invisible. And I can't do that anymore." Alaric descended the stairs slowly. "Then don't." "What?" "Don't be invisible. Don't be quiet." He stopped in front of her. "Be angry. Be loud. Be anything but what they expect. Easy for you to say. You're a duke. And you're extraordinary." Seraphine laughed, broken and bitter. "I'm not." "You are." His voice was fierce now, urgent. "You speak 3 languages. You've read more books than half the men in Parliament. You're sharp and clever and brave enough to walk out that door with nothing but a trunk and a prayer. That's not plain, Seraphine. That's extraordinary." Tears burned her eyes. "Stop." "No." He reached for her hand. She let him take it. "Stay, please. Stay and let me prove I can be better than the man who hurt you." "Why do you care?" "Because..." He stopped, took a breath. "Because when I saw you in the library yesterday, surrounded by newspapers and plans, I realized something. You're the first person I've met in this godforsaken city who isn't pretending, who isn't playing a role. You're real. And I need that. I need you." Seraphine's heart was breaking. Because she wanted to believe him. Because part of her, the part that was still 18 and desperate to be seen, wanted to stay, but the rest of her knew better. "You don't need me," she said gently. "You need to feel like you're saving someone. But I don't need saving, Alaric. I need to save myself." And before he could respond, she opened the door and walked out into the dawn. Alaric stood in the doorway and watched her go. Watched her walk down the steps, her trunk clutched in both hands, her spine straight despite the weight. Watched her reach the street and keep walking. Watched her disappear around the corner. And felt something inside him shatter. He'd let her go. Again. Because he was a coward. Because he didn't know how to ask her to stay without making it about him. Because he was still that arrogant, blind fool who looked at her and saw nothing. The door closed with a soft click, and Alaric stood in the empty entrance hall and realized he'd just made the worst mistake of his life. London, 1817. 5 years later, Alaric Devereux stood in the center of his study and stared at the letter in his hand. It was from his steward in Yorkshire. Something about drainage issues and crop rotations. Important, probably. He couldn't focus on a single word. This happened sometimes, more often than he cared to admit. He would be reading correspondence or reviewing accounts or sitting through another interminable session in Parliament, and suddenly his mind would drift to a girl with 2 large eyes and a trunk she could barely carry, to the sound of a door closing at dawn, to the worst mistake he'd ever made. 5 years. It had been 5 years since Seraphine Caldwell walked out of his life. 5 years since he'd stood in that entrance hall and let her go. 5 years of telling himself he'd done the right thing, that she'd wanted to leave, that he couldn't have stopped her. 5 years of lying to himself. He set the letter down and crossed to the window. The view was the same as always. Manicured gardens, perfectly trimmed hedges, the kind of beauty that came from control and money, and an army of servants who made sure every blade of grass knew its place. It was suffocating. Alaric had spent 5 years running his estates, managing his fortune, doing everything a duke was supposed to do. He'd expanded the holdings, modernized the farms, invested in railways and shipping. He was richer now than his father had ever been, and emptier. He'd had relationships, of course, discreet affairs with widows and actresses who knew the rules, who understood that desire was one thing and commitment was another. None of them lasted, none of them mattered, because none of them looked at him the way Seraphine had, like she could see through all his armor to the broken thing underneath. None of them challenged him. made him feel anything real. None of them were her. "You're brooding again." Alaric turned. Viscount Theodoric Ashworth, Theo, stood in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of whiskey and wearing his usual expression of amused concern. "I'm working," Alaric said. "You're staring out the window like a tragic hero in a Gothic novel." Theo crossed the room and handed him a glass. "Drink, it'll help." "It won't." "Then drink anyway. Misery loves company, and I'm excellent company." Despite himself, Alaric smiled. Theo had been his friend since Eton, the second son of an earl with too much charm and not enough responsibility. He spent his time gambling, flirting, and inserting himself into Alaric's life whenever he looked like he might do something stupid. Like now. "What are you doing here, Theo?" "Saving you from yourself." Theo dropped into a chair and propped his boots on the desk. "You've been impossible lately, snapping at servants, glowering at everyone. Lady Weatherby says you're becoming a hermit." Lady Weatherby should mind her own business. She's 73 and bored. Minding other people's business is literally all she has. Theo sipped his whiskey. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Liar. You've had that look for weeks." "The one that says you're thinking about something you can't have." Alaric said nothing. Theo's eyes narrowed. "It's a woman, isn't it?" "It's not. It's absolutely a woman." "Who is she?" "Anyone I know." "Drop it, Theo. Not a chance." "You've been miserable for 5 years, Alaric. 5 years. I've watched you go through the motions of being alive without actually living. So whoever she is, whatever happened, you need to either fix it or let it go." "I can't fix it." "Why not?" "Because I don't know where she is." The words came out before Alaric could stop them. "I tried to find her. I hired investigators, sent letters to every employment agency in England. Nothing. She disappeared." "Who disappeared?" Alaric took a long drink. "Her name was Seraphine Caldwell. She stayed here 5 years ago. My mother treated her badly. And I..." He stopped, swallowed. "I looked at her and called her plain. And then I let her walk away." Theo stared at him. "You're an idiot." "I know." "No, I mean a truly spectacular idiot. The kind of idiot that should be studied by scholars." "I know. Why did you let her go?" "Because I was too much of a coward to ask her to stay." Alaric set down his glass with more force than necessary. "Because I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. Because I've spent 5 years walking through this house like a ghost. And I can't... His voice cracked. Theo leaned forward. "Alaric, breathe." Alaric pressed his hands to his face. He didn't cry. Dukes didn't cry, but he felt it. The weight of 5 years of regret pressing down on him like the sky. "I should have stopped her," he said quietly. "I should have run after her. I should have told her." "Told her what?" "That she mattered. That she wasn't plain. That I was a blind fool who didn't deserve her but wanted her anyway." Theo was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and refilled both glasses. "You need to go out," he said finally. You need to leave this mausoleum and remember there's a world outside these walls. There's a ball tonight. Lady Worthington's. Very exclusive, very tedious. Perfect for reminding yourself that life continues even when you're determined to be miserable. I'm not going to a ball. Yes, you are. Because if you spend one more night sitting in this study, staring at nothing and drowning in regret, I'm going to set something on fire. You wouldn't dare. Try me." Alaric looked at his friend, at the genuine concern beneath the flippant exterior. "Fine," he said. "One ball, but I'm leaving early." "Deal." Lady Worthington's ball. That evening, the ballroom was exactly as Theo had described. Exclusive, tedious, full of the same faces Alaric had been seeing at these events for a decade. He stood near the edge of the room, a glass of champagne in hand, and wondered how quickly he could leave without causing offense. "See?" Theo appeared at his elbow. "This is better than sitting alone in the dark." "It's really not. Give it time. The night is young, and Lady Worthington has allegedly imported some very interesting guests." "Fascinating. Your enthusiasm is overwhelming." Alaric was about to respond when the crowd near the entrance shifted, and he saw her. At first, he thought he was imagining it, a trick of the light, A ghost, conjured by too much whiskey and too many sleepless nights. But then she moved, and the candlelight caught her face, and Alaric's heart stopped. Seraphine. But not the Seraphine he remembered. This woman was transformed. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk that moved like water when she walked. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant arrangement that revealed the graceful line of her neck. Her skin glowed, her posture radiated confidence, and her eyes, those two large, too honest eyes, held a steel that hadn't been there before. She was breathtaking. She stood at the entrance on the arm of an older gentleman Alaric didn't recognize. The man was handsome in a weathered way, silver-haired and distinguished, with the easy confidence of someone who had earned his place in the world rather than inherited it. He leaned down and said something to Seraphine. She laughed. The sound hit Alaric like a physical blow. "Who is that?" Theo asked, following his gaze. Alaric couldn't speak. "The woman in green," Theo continued, "with Montrose. I've never seen her before. She's stunning." "Montrose," Alaric found his voice. "Lord Cassius Montrose. The very same. Merchant prince. Made his fortune in shipping. Rumor has it he's looking for a wife." Something cold and sharp twisted in Alaric's chest. "And the woman?" His voice sounded strange to his own ears. "No idea. But judging by the way every man in this room is staring at her, she's about to become the talk of London." Alaric set down his glass. "Where are you going?" Theo called after him. But Alaric was already moving, cutting through the crowd with single-minded focus. Toward her, toward Seraphine, toward the woman he'd spent 5 years trying to forget. The woman he couldn't forget. Alaric had forgotten how to breathe. That was the only explanation for why his chest felt so tight, why the air in the ballroom suddenly seemed too thin, too hot, too insufficient for what his lungs needed. He moved through the crowd like a man possessed, weaving between silk gowns and dark evening coats, his eyes never leaving her face. The music swelled around him, a waltz, something Viennese and elegant. But he heard none of it. The conversations, the laughter, the clink of crystal glasses, all of it faded into meaningless noise. There was only her, Seraphine. She stood near the refreshment table now, Lord Montrose at her side, and she was smiling at something he'd said. Not the careful, controlled smile Alaric remembered from 5 years ago. This was real, genuine, the kind of smile that reached her eyes and made them shine like polished mahogany in the candlelight. She looked happy. The realization hit him with unexpected force. She looked like she belonged here, like she'd always belonged here, like the frightened, invisible girl who'd packed a trunk and walked away at dawn had never existed at all. Alaric was 10 feet away when Montrose noticed him. The older man's expression shifted, not hostile but assessing, the look of someone who recognized power when he saw it and wasn't particularly impressed by it. "Ashford," Montrose said, his voice smooth and cultured. "What a pleasant surprise." Alaric barely heard him. His gaze was locked on Seraphine. She'd gone very still. The smile had vanished from her face, replaced by something Alaric couldn't read. Not shock. She'd seen him before he approached, he realized. She'd known he was here. And she'd chosen not to acknowledge him. "Lord Montrose," Alaric said, forcing himself to be civil, to follow the rules of polite society, even though every instinct he had was screaming at him to pull Seraphine away from this man, this stranger who stood too close to her, who made her laugh like it was the easiest thing in the world. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced." "No." Montrose's eyebrow arched. "Strange. I thought everyone in London knew everyone else. Or at least pretended to." He gestured toward Seraphine with easy familiarity. "May I present Miss Seraphine Caldwell? She's recently returned from abroad. Miss Caldwell, this is the Duke of Ashford." "We've met," Seraphine said. Her voice was exactly as Alaric remembered, soft, steady, with that slight accent he'd never been able to place. But there was something new underneath it now, a sharpness, a blade wrapped in velvet. "Have you?" Montrose looked between them with interest. "How intriguing. Miss Caldwell has been remarkably silent about her time in England before Italy." "It wasn't worth mentioning," Seraphine said, her eyes still on Alaric. "I was very young, very foolish, and very briefly a guest at Ashford Manor." A guest, Alaric repeated. The word tasted like ash. Is that what you were? What else would I have been, Your Grace? The formality in her tone was worse than anger, worse than tears. It was the voice of someone addressing a stranger, someone who meant nothing. I didn't know you'd return to London, Alaric said, and hated how his voice sounded. Uncertain, almost desperate. I didn't know I required your permission. Montrose laughed, a warm, genuine sound. She's marvelous, isn't she? Never afraid to speak her mind. It's refreshing after so many years of London politeness. Refreshing, Alaric echoed, his gaze never leaving Seraphine's face. Yes. The air between them crackled with something Alaric couldn't name. Something that made his skin feel too tight, his pulse too fast. Seraphine's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around her champagne glass. A tell. A crack in her perfect composure. She wasn't as unaffected as she pretended to be. The realization sent something hot and reckless through Alaric's veins. How long have you been back? He asked. 3 weeks. And before that, you were in Italy? Florence, yes. I worked as a governess and companion for a family there, the Medicis. Very old blood, very kind people. She paused, and there was something deliberate in the way she added, they treated me like family. The emphasis on the last word wasn't lost on Alaric. He deserved that. He knew he did. And how did you and Lord Montrose meet? The question came out before he could stop it. Too sharp, too possessive. Montrose's expression shifted to something amused. Are you interrogating her, Ashford? I'm curious. Careful. Curiosity can be dangerous. So can indifference. The words hung in the air between them. Seraphine's jaw tightened. Lord Montrose was kind enough to offer me passage back to England when the family I worked for relocated to Venice. We became friends during the journey. Friends, Alaric repeated. Yes, Your Grace. Friends. Some people are capable of kindness without ulterior motives. The barb struck home. Alaric felt it like a blade between his ribs. Miss Caldwell, he said quietly. Might I have a word? In private? No. The refusal was immediate, final. Please. I said no. Seraphine. That's Miss Caldwell to you. Her voice was ice now, pure, lethal ice. You don't have the right to use my given name. Montrose cleared his throat. Perhaps we should... Dance with me, Alaric said, desperate now. One dance? That's all I'm asking. You're asking for far more than that, and we both know it. One dance, Seraphine. Please. She stared at him. Her eyes were bright, too bright, and Alaric realized with a jolt that she was fighting tears, but her voice when she spoke was steady. Why? So you can ease your conscience? So you can tell yourself you tried? She shook her head. I'm not here for your redemption, Your Grace. I'm here because Lord Montrose was kind enough to invite me, because I have friends now, a life, things that don't involve you. I know that. You just what? Want to apologize? Want to explain? Want to make yourself feel better about what you did? She took a breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter, sadder. It's been 5 years, Alaric. 5 years. Whatever you think you need to say, I don't need to hear it. What if I need to say it? Then that's your burden, not mine. She turned to Montrose. I'd like to leave. Of course. Montrose offered her his arm, shooting Alaric a look that was part warning, part pity. Ashford, always a pleasure. They moved toward the door. Alaric stood frozen, watching them go. And then something inside him snapped. He couldn't let her leave. Not again, not like this. I looked for you, he called out. Seraphine stopped. The ballroom around them seemed to quiet. Or maybe it was just Alaric's imagination. Maybe the world hadn't actually stopped spinning. Maybe it just felt that way. She turned slowly. What? I looked for you. Alaric's voice was rough, raw. After you left, I looked for you everywhere. I hired investigators. I wrote to every employment agency in England. I went to Hampshire, to Bath, to every godforsaken corner of this country trying to find you. Why? The question was barely a whisper. Because I was a fool. He took a step closer, then another. Because I let you walk away when I should have run after you. Because I've spent 5 years regretting that moment. Because you were right, I was blind and arrogant and so wrapped up in my own misery that I didn't see what was right in front of me. And what was that? You. The word came out like a confession. You were right in front of me and I looked at you and saw nothing. But I see you now, Seraphine. God help me. I see you now. Tears spilled down her cheeks. It's too late, she whispered. Is it? Yes. She brushed at her face angrily. You don't get to do this. You don't get to walk back into my life after 5 years and say these things. You don't get to make me feel... She cut herself off. Feel what? Alaric asked softly. Like that girl again, the one who waited for you to see her, the one who stood in that drawing room and heard you call her plain and felt her heart break. I'm not her anymore, Alaric. I'm not that desperate, invisible girl who needed your approval. I know. I can see that. Then you can also see that I don't need you. I know that too. Then what do you want? Alaric took a breath. A chance. Just one chance to prove that I'm not the man I was 5 years ago, that I'm not the blind fool who let you go. Why should I give you that chance? Because... He stopped, swallowed. Because I think you want to. Seraphine laughed, broken and bitter. Your arrogance is truly astounding. I'm not being arrogant, I'm being honest. He gestured between them. This, whatever this is, you feel it too, I know you do. What I feel is anger. And what else? She said nothing. But she didn't leave. Montrose stepped forward. Miss Caldwell, we don't have to stay. Say the word and we'll go. For a long moment, Seraphine just stood there, torn between the safety Montrose offered and the danger Alaric represented. Then she took a breath and looked at Alaric. One dance, she said finally. You get one dance, and then you leave me alone. Relief flooded through Alaric so intense it made him dizzy. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. She handed her glass to Montrose. You might not survive it. The waltz was torture. Beautiful, exquisite torture. Alaric's hand settled at Seraphine's waist, exactly where it should be, proper and respectful, but he felt the contact like a brand. The emerald silk was smooth beneath his palm, and beneath that he could feel the warmth of her, the slight tension in her frame. Her hand rested on his shoulder, light as a bird, as if she might take flight at any moment. They began to move. For the first few turns, neither of them spoke. The music swelled around them, violins and cellos weaving something achingly romantic. And they fell into the rhythm like they'd done this 1,000 times before, but they hadn't. This was the first time Alaric had ever held Seraphine Caldwell in his arms, and he knew with bone-deep certainty it couldn't be the last. You look beautiful, he said finally. Don't. It's true. I don't care if it's true. Her gaze was fixed somewhere past his shoulder, refusing to meet his eyes. You don't get to compliment me now. Why not? Because 5 years ago you called me plain, and now you call me beautiful. Which one was the lie, Your Grace? Neither. His hand tightened fractionally at her waist. 5 years ago I was blind. I looked at you and only saw what I expected to see. Another obligation, another burden. I didn't see you. And now? Now I can't see anything else. She finally looked at him. Her eyes were still bright with unshed tears, but there was something else there now. Something that looked like hope, fighting against bitterness. You hurt me, she whispered. I know. You made me feel like I was nothing. I know. And now you want me to believe you've changed? That you're different? I don't want you to believe anything. I want to prove it. How? However you'll let me. They turned again, moving through the crowd of other dancers. Alaric was acutely aware of the eyes on them, the whispers, the speculation. Let them talk. He didn't care about anything except the woman in his arms. Why did you come back to London? He asked. That's none of your concern. Humor me. Seraphine was quiet for a moment. Then, because I was tired of running. I spent 5 years building a life in Italy, a good life. I was happy there, but I realized I was still hiding, still letting what happened here define me. So I decided to come back, to face my past. And Montrose. Her lips curved. Not quite a smile. Jealous, Your Grace. Desperately. The honest answer seemed to surprise her. Cassius has been a good friend to me. Better than I deserved. He offered me passage back to England. He's introduced me to society. He's asked nothing in return except my company. He's in love with you. No, he's not. She said it with complete certainty. He's kind. He's protective. But he's not in love with me, and I'm not in love with him. Good. That's not your concern either. Everything about you is my concern. Why? Because you've decided it is? Because you've spent 5 years feeling guilty? She shook her head. I'm not a project, Alaric. I'm not something for you to fix so you can feel better about yourself. That's not what this is. Isn't it? No. He pulled her infinitesimally closer. Still proper, still appropriate, but close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something floral and expensive that he didn't recognize. This is me realizing that I let go of something irreplaceable. This is me understanding that I've been walking through my life like a ghost for 5 years because the one person who made me feel alive left. This is me being selfish and desperate and willing to beg if that's what it takes. Seraphine's breath caught. You're not being fair, she whispered. I know. You can't just say things like that. Why not? Because, her voice cracked, because I spent 5 years getting over you, 5 years building walls so I'd never feel that small again. And now you're here, saying exactly what I needed to hear 5 years ago, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to survive this a second time. The music was ending. The final notes of the waltz faded into silence, and the other dancers began to disperse, moving toward the edges of the ballroom. But Alaric and Seraphine stood frozen in the center of the floor. I won't hurt you again, Alaric said quietly. You can't promise that. Then let me try. Let me prove it. How? Come to Ashford Manor. She laughed, sharp and disbelieving. Absolutely not. Not as a ward. Not as a guest. He took a breath. I'm hosting a house party next month. 2 weeks. Riding, hunting, evening entertainals, all the usual nonsense. Come. Bring Montrose if you need a chaperone. Just give me those 2 weeks to show you I've changed. That's insane. Probably. I don't trust you. I don't expect you to. Not yet. Seraphine stared at him for a long moment. Around them, the ballroom hummed with renewed conversation. The orchestra was preparing for the next dance. Life was moving forward. But in this moment, in this space between them, time seemed suspended. If I say yes, what happens at the end of 2 weeks? She asked. Whatever you want. If you still hate me, I'll let you go. I'll never bother you again. And if I don't, then we'll figure it out together. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were clear, decided. 2 weeks, she said. That's all you get. And if you disappoint me, if you make me regret this, I won't. You don't know that. Yes, Alaric said quietly. I do. 3 days after the ball, a letter arrived at Lord Montrose's townhouse in Belgravia. Seraphine recognized the seal before she even opened it. The Ashford crest. A lion and a rose intertwined in a way that had probably meant something noble once, but now just looked like two things trying to consume each other. She held the envelope for a long moment, feeling the weight of the expensive paper, the slight texture of the wax seal beneath her fingertips. She should throw it away. She should burn it. She should do anything except open it. Instead, she broke the seal. The handwriting inside was strong and precise, each letter formed with the kind of careful control that suggested the writer had labored over every word. Miss Caldwell, I am writing to formally extend an invitation to you and Lord Montrose to attend a house party at Ashford Manor, beginning the 1st day of June. The gathering will last a fortnight and will include various entertainments befitting the season. I understand this invitation may come as a surprise. I understand you may have considerable reservations, but I hope you will consider accepting. I meant what I said at the ball, every word. The guest list will be small, intimate. You will not be subjected to the kind of scrutiny you experienced 5 years ago. You have my word on that. Please know that if you choose not to come, I will understand. I will respect your decision, and I will not trouble you again, but I hope you will come. I hope you will give me the chance I don't deserve. Yours, Alaric Devereux. Duke of Ashford. Seraphine read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and set it on her desk, next to the small collection of books she'd brought back from Italy. She told herself she wouldn't go. She told herself it was madness to even consider it. She told herself that returning to Ashford Manor would undo all the work she'd done to rebuild herself. But late that night, when sleep refused to come, she found herself reading the letter again by candlelight. I meant what I said at the ball. Every word. His voice echoed in her memory, rough and raw and so achingly sincere that it had nearly broken her resolve right there on the ballroom floor. I see you now, Seraphine. God help me. I see you now. She pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. This was dangerous. He was dangerous, not in the way of violence or cruelty, but in the way of hope. In the way that made her want things she'd taught herself not to want. Things like forgiveness, like second chances, like the possibility that people could change. A knock at her door made her jump. Seraphine? Cassius's voice came through the wood. Are you awake? She hastily folded the letter and tucked it into her desk drawer. Come in. Cassius entered carrying 2 glasses of brandy and wearing the concerned expression that had become familiar over the past 3 years. He was a good man, genuinely good, in a way that was rare among the men she'd met. He'd taken her under his protection when she'd needed it most, asked for nothing in return, and treated her with a respect she'd never experienced before. She loved him. Not romantically, but deeply. The way you love someone who sees you at your worst and stays anyway. You're troubled, he said, handing her a glass. I'm fine. Seraphine. He sat in the chair across from her. I've known you for 3 years. You're many things, but fine is not one of them right now. She took a sip of brandy and felt it burn down her throat. The Duke sent a letter, she said finally. Ah. Cassius leaned back. I was wondering when that would arrive. You knew he would write? I had a feeling. The man looked like he'd been struck by lightning at the ball. And when he danced with you... Cassius shook his head. I've seen many things in my life, but I've never seen someone look at another person the way he looked at you. You're imagining things. Am I? Because I'm fairly certain half of London saw it too. Seraphine set down her glass. It doesn't matter how he looked at me. What matters is how he treated me 5 years ago. And how did he treat you? Like I was nothing. The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. Cassius was quiet for a moment. Did he hurt you physically? No, never. She looked up. It wasn't like that. He just dismissed me with a single word, and then he forgot I existed. And now? Now he says he's changed, that he sees me now, that he wants a chance to prove it. Do you believe him? I don't know. She picked up the letter again, turning it over in her hands. Part of me wants to. Part of me wants to believe that people can change, that we're not doomed to repeat the same patterns forever. But the other part, the part that remembers what it felt like to pack a trunk at dawn and walk away from the only shelter I had, that part says I'm a fool for even considering it. What does he want? He's invited us to a house party, 2 weeks at Ashford Manor. He says it will be small, intimate, that I won't be subjected to the kind of treatment I received before. And you're thinking about going. It wasn't a question. Seraphine met his gaze. Am I insane? Possibly, Cassius smiled. But I think you should go anyway. What? You heard me. I think you should accept his invitation. Cassius, listen to me. He leaned forward, his expression serious now. You've spent 3 years with me, Seraphine. 3 years rebuilding yourself, becoming stronger, braver, more confident. But you've also been running. I haven't been running. I've been surviving. Those aren't mutually exclusive. He paused. You left England because you needed to escape, because staying would have destroyed you. I understand that, but now you're back. And the moment you saw him at that ball, I watched something happen to you. Something shifted. Nothing shifted. Don't lie to me, or to yourself. His voice gentled. You're still carrying him, Seraphine. Still carrying the weight of what happened. and you'll never be free of it if you don't face him. I did face him, at the ball. You faced him in a room full of people where both of you were playing roles. That's not the same as really confronting what happened between you. Seraphine felt tears prick at her eyes. What if he disappoints me again? Then you'll survive it, just like you survived it before. But this time you'll know for certain you'll have closure, and you can walk away knowing you gave him a chance and he wasted it. And if he doesn't disappoint me, Cassius smiled, then maybe you'll get the thing you've been afraid to want, the thing you've been denying yourself because you're terrified of being hurt again. What thing? Love, Seraphine. You might get love. The word hung in the air between them. Seraphine looked down at the letter in her hands, at Alaric's careful, precise handwriting, at the words that had clearly cost him something to write. I hope you will give me the chance I don't deserve. If I go, she said slowly, will you come with me? Of course, someone needs to make sure he treats you properly, and if he doesn't... Cassius's smile turned dangerous. Well, I may be a merchant, but I still know how to throw a punch. Despite everything, Seraphine laughed. All right, she said quietly. We'll go. The reply arrived at Ashford Manor 2 days later. Alaric was in the stables when his secretary found him, waving an envelope and looking slightly out of breath from the walk. Your Grace, a letter from Lord Montrose's residence. Alaric's heart stopped. He took the envelope with hands that weren't quite steady and broke the seal. The handwriting was elegant, feminine. Each letter formed with the kind of precision that came from years of careful practice. Your Grace, Lord Montrose and I accept your invitation. We will arrive on the 1st of June, as requested. I am trusting that your assurances are genuine, that this house party will be conducted with respect and propriety, that I will not be made to feel as I was made to feel 5 years ago. If you betray that trust, you will not get another chance. 2 weeks, Your Grace. That is what you asked for, and that is what you will receive. What you do with that time is entirely up to you. Regards, S. Caldwell. It was formal, careful, guarded, but it was a yes. Alaric read the letter 3 times, feeling something unfurl in his chest. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. She was coming. She was giving him a chance. He wouldn't waste it. The next 3 weeks were a blur of preparation. Alaric threw himself into planning the house party with an intensity that made his staff exchange worried glances. He reviewed every detail personally. The guest list, the menus, the sleeping arrangements, the entertainment. Everything had to be perfect, not because he cared about impressing London society, but because Seraphine would be there. And this time he would get it right. He invited carefully. Only people he knew would be kind, who wouldn't gossip or judge or make Seraphine feel uncomfortable. Theo, of course, and Lady Eleanor Hartley, a widow with sharp wit and no patience for nonsense. Lord and Lady Pemberton, an older couple who spent most of their time discussing archaeology and barely noticed anyone else, and a handful of others, all carefully vetted, all trustworthy. No one who would make Seraphine feel small, no one who would call her plain. The Dowager Duchess had been less than pleased when she learned of the plans. A house party, she'd said, her voice dripping with disdain. You haven't hosted one in 5 years, and now suddenly you're playing Lord of the Manor. It's my manor, Alaric had replied calmly. I can host what I like. And this has nothing to do with the Caldwell girl? He'd met his mother's gaze directly. Her name is Seraphine. And yes, it has everything to do with her. The Dowager had gone very still. You're making a mistake. Then it's my mistake to make. She's nobody, Alaric. She has no family, no fortune, no mother. His voice had been quiet, deadly. You will not speak of her that way. Not in my house, not ever. Do I make myself clear? For the first time in his life, Alaric had seen something like fear flicker across his mother's face. Perfectly clear, Your Grace. She'd left shortly after. Gone to Bath to visit friends, she'd said. Alaric suspected she simply couldn't bear to witness what she saw as his descent into madness. He didn't care. Let her leave. Let all of London gossip if they wanted. The only person whose opinion mattered was Seraphine. And he had 2 weeks to prove he'd changed. 2 weeks to show her he saw her now. 2 weeks to win back what he'd thrown away. The morning of June 1st dawned clear and bright. Alaric stood at the window of his study, watching the drive for any sign of approaching carriages. Theo found him there an hour later. "You're going to wear a hole in the floor with all that pacing," Theo said, dropping into a chair. "Sit down, have a drink. Try to look less like a man facing execution." "I can't." "You can. You just won't." Theo studied him. "You're really doing this, aren't you? You're really going to try to win her back?" "Yes." "Even though she might reject you?" "Yes." "Even though this could end in spectacular disaster?" "Yes." Theo shook his head. "You're either the bravest man I know or the stupidest." "Probably both." A sound from outside made Alaric's head snap up. Carriage wheels on gravel. His heart kicked against his ribs like a wild thing trying to escape. Theo stood and clapped him on the shoulder. "Well, here we go. Try not to make a complete fool of yourself in the first 5 minutes." No promises. They walked downstairs together. The entrance hall was already filling with servants preparing to receive the guests. The butler stood by the door, his expression professionally neutral. Alaric took his place at the top of the steps and waited. The first carriage was Lord and Lady Pemberton. They emerged in a flurry of bags and archaeological journals, barely acknowledging Alaric's greeting before disappearing inside to argue about some ancient ruin. The second was Lady Eleanor, who swept up the steps with a knowing smile. "This should be interesting," she murmured as she passed. The third carriage was larger, more elegant. Alaric's breath caught. The door opened. Lord Montrose emerged first, turning to offer his hand to someone inside, and then Seraphine stepped out into the sunlight. She wore a traveling dress of deep blue that made her eyes look almost black. Her hair was pinned up beneath a small hat, and her gloved hands clasped a small reticule. She looked up at the house, at him, and for just a moment Alaric saw something flicker across her face. Fear, hope, determination. Then it was gone, replaced by careful composure. She ascended the steps with Montrose at her side. Alaric bowed. "Miss Caldwell, Lord Montrose, welcome to Ashford Manor." "Your Grace." Seraphine's curtsy was perfect, impersonal. "Thank you for your hospitality." Their eyes met, and Alaric felt the world narrow to just this, just her. Just the two of them standing on the steps of the house where everything had gone wrong 5 years ago, where everything, perhaps, could be made right. "I'm glad you came," he said quietly. "Don't make me regret it," she replied. And then she swept past him into the house. Alaric stood there for a moment, his heart hammering. 2 weeks. He had 2 weeks. He wouldn't waste a single moment. Seraphine's room was not the same one she'd occupied 5 years ago. That cold, forgotten chamber at the far end of the east wing, the one that smelled of dust and neglect, was nowhere to be seen. Instead, she'd been given a suite in the main wing, a spacious bedroom with windows overlooking the rose gardens, silk wallpaper in soft cream, a 4-poster bed with curtains that looked like they'd cost more than everything she'd owned 5 years ago combined. Fresh flowers stood in a vase on the writing desk, roses, deep red, just beginning to open. A maid had unpacked her trunk while Seraphine stood at the window, looking out at grounds she both remembered and didn't. The gardens were the same, the distant line of trees, the marble fountain where she'd sometimes sat in the early mornings before anyone else was awake, just to feel like she had a few moments that belonged to her alone. But everything felt different now, because she was different. "Will there be anything else, miss?" the maid asked. Seraphine turned. The girl was young, 17, maybe 18, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. "What's your name?" Seraphine asked. The maid blinked, clearly surprised. "Lucy, miss." "Thank you, Lucy, for unpacking. You did a lovely job." Pink flooded the girl's cheeks. "Oh, it's nothing, miss, just doing my work." "It's not nothing, thank you." Lucy curtsied and left, looking slightly dazed. Seraphine turned back to the window. She could do this. She could survive 2 weeks in this house. She'd survived worse. Dinner that evening was held in the formal dining room. Seraphine had dressed carefully, a gown of pale gold silk that Cassius had insisted she bring. "You need armor," he'd said, and sometimes armor looks like an evening gown that costs more than a carriage. He'd been right. The moment she entered the dining room and saw the way Alaric's eyes widened, the way his gaze traveled from her face down to the elegant cut of the dress and back up again, like he was trying to memorize every detail, she felt a surge of satisfaction. Good. Let him see what he'd thrown away. Let him see what she'd become without him. The dinner party was small, just as Alaric had promised. 8 people total. Lord and Lady Pemberton sat at one end, already deep in discussion about some Roman aqueduct. Lady Eleanor held court in the middle, making wry observations about London society that made even Cassius laugh. Theo sat across from Seraphine, charming and irreverent, clearly trying to put everyone at ease, and Alaric sat at the head of the table, watching her. He'd barely looked away since she'd entered the room. It was unnerving, not in a threatening way, but in a way that made her skin feel too tight, her pulse too quick. She could feel the weight of his attention like a physical thing. "Miss Caldwell," Lady Eleanor said, pulling Seraphine's focus away from the Duke. "Lord Montrose tells us you spent several years in Florence. What was it like?" Seraphine took a sip of wine, grateful for the distraction. "Beautiful. Overwhelming at first, but I grew to love it. And you worked as a governess." "Yes, for the Medici family. They were very kind to me." "The Medicis?" Lady Pemberton looked up from her discussion of aqueducts. "The old Florentine family?" "A distant branch, yes. They'd fallen on difficult times financially, but they still maintained the most extraordinary library. I spent hours there." "What did you teach?" This from Theo, who was regarding her with open curiosity. "French, English literature, some history. The daughter, Juliana, was fascinated by the English romantics. We spent months reading Byron and Shelley." "And did you enjoy it?" Lady Eleanor asked. "The teaching?" Seraphine considered the question. "I enjoyed the family. The work itself was..." She paused, searching for the right word. "Necessary. I was grateful for it. But no, I didn't love it. I loved the freedom it gave me, the independence, the ability to build a life on my own terms." She felt, rather than saw, Alaric's reaction to those words. Saw his hand tighten almost imperceptibly around his wineglass. "And what made you decide to return to England?" Lady Eleanor asked. Before Seraphine could answer, Cassius spoke up. "I convinced her, told her she'd been hiding long enough." "I wasn't hiding," Seraphine protested. "You absolutely were. And there's no shame in it. Sometimes we need to hide, to heal, but eventually we need to come back and face the things we ran from." The words hung in the air. Seraphine's gaze flickered to Alaric. He was staring at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "And what were you running from, Miss Caldwell?" Theo asked, his tone light, but his eyes sharp. Seraphine forced a smile. "The same thing we're all running from, Lord Ashworth. Ourselves." After dinner, the party retired to the drawing room. It was a beautiful space. High ceilings, elegant furniture arranged in intimate groupings. A pianoforte in the corner that looked like it had been recently tuned. Seraphine gravitated toward the windows, needing air, needing space. She was acutely aware of Alaric moving through the room, greeting his guests, playing the role of perfect host, but she could feel his attention returning to her again and again, like a compass needle finding north. "You're doing well?" She turned to find Cassius beside her, holding 2 glasses of port. She accepted one gratefully. "Am I?" "Better than I expected, honestly. I thought you might flee before the fish course." "I considered it. But you didn't. That's progress." He clinked his glass against hers. "How are you really?" "I don't know," Seraphine admitted. "Being here, in this house, it's bringing back things I thought I'd moved past. The way the light comes through the windows in the morning, the smell of the roses, the sound of footsteps in the hallway. It all feels so familiar. Too familiar." "And him?" She didn't need to ask who Cassius meant. "He's..." She trailed off. "Different. The same. I don't know. He keeps looking at me like you're the only person in the room?" "Yes. Because to him, you are." Seraphine shook her head. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" Because I've been watching him all evening, Seraphine. And that man hasn't taken his eyes off you for more than 30 seconds at a time. He looks at you like you're oxygen, and he's drowning. Stop. It's true. It doesn't matter if it's true. She turned to face him fully. What matters is that he had his chance 5 years ago and he wasted it. What matters is that I spent years rebuilding myself. And I can't let him undo all that work just because he's decided he has regrets. No one's asking you to. Aren't you? You're the one who told me to come here to face him. I told you to face him, not to forgive him, not to give him another chance unless that's what you want. There's a difference. Is there? Before Cassius could answer, a voice interrupted them. Miss Caldwell. Seraphine turned. Alaric stood a few feet away, his expression carefully neutral. I was wondering if you might do us the honor of playing. The pianoforte has been sadly neglected since... He stopped. For some time. I'm not very skilled, Seraphine said. I doubt that's true. It is. I can barely manage a simple sonata. Then play a simple sonata, please. There was something in his voice, something that sounded almost like desperation. Seraphine glanced at Cassius, who gave her an encouraging nod. All right, she said, but don't say I didn't warn you. The pianoforte was beautiful. Someone had placed fresh sheet music on the stand. Mozart, one of the easier sonatas. Seraphine sat on the bench and let her fingers rest on the keys for a moment. She hadn't played in months, not since leaving Florence. The room behind her had gone quiet. She could feel everyone watching, could feel Alaric watching. She took a breath and began to play. The first few notes were tentative, uncertain. But then muscle memory took over, and her fingers found the rhythm, found the melody. It wasn't perfect. She stumbled over a few passages, missed some of the more complex runs. But it was honest. And as she played, something loosened in her chest. The music filled the room, sweet and melancholy. A conversation between treble and bass. Between hope and sorrow, she lost herself in it, forgot where she was, forgot who was listening. There was only this, the music, the feeling of the keys beneath her fingers. The final chord faded into silence. For a moment, no one spoke. Then applause broke out. Polite, appreciative. That was lovely, dear, Lady Pemberton said. Simply lovely. Brava, Cassius added, raising his glass. Seraphine stood, her cheeks warm. Thank you, though I told you it wasn't very good. It was perfect. The voice came from directly behind her. She turned. Alaric stood there close enough that she could see the flecks of darker grey in his eyes, close enough that she could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and something else. Something that made her think of libraries and leather and safety. It wasn't perfect, she said. I made several mistakes. I didn't hear any. Then you weren't listening properly. I was listening to everything. His voice dropped lower, intimate. Thank you. For playing. You asked me to. And you could have said no, I should have, but you didn't. They stood there, caught in the space between politeness and something far more dangerous. The room around them seemed to fade. The other guests, the conversation. Everything became background noise. Seraphine, Alaric began. I should retire, she interrupted. It's been a long day. Of course, I'll walk you. That's not necessary. Please. The word was quiet, almost vulnerable. Seraphine hesitated, then nodded once. They walked through the corridors in silence. The house was quiet now. Most of the servants had retired for the evening. The only sound was their footsteps on the marble floor and the distant ticking of a clock somewhere. Do you remember this hallway? Alaric asked. Yes. You used to walk it early in the mornings, before anyone else was awake. Seraphine stopped. How did you know that? I saw you, once, from the window of my study. You were carrying a book. You went to the fountain in the garden and sat there for an hour just reading. You were watching me. Not watching. I happened to see you. And I wondered what you were reading. What made you look so peaceful, when everywhere else in this house you looked like you were bracing for impact? Seraphine's throat tightened. I was reading poetry. Wordsworth, I think. Or maybe Coleridge. And did it help? The poetry? Sometimes. It helped me remember there was beauty in the world, even when everything else felt ugly. They started walking again. "I'm sorry," Alaric said quietly. "For what?" "For making you feel that way. For making this house my home. A place where you couldn't breathe. It wasn't just you, it was your mother, it was London society, it was everything. But I was part of it. A big part. And I'm sorry." They reached her door. Seraphine turned to face him, her hand on the doorknob. "Apologies are just words, Alaric. They don't undo what happened. I know, but they're a start. Are they? Or are they just a way to make yourself feel better?" "Probably both." He took a breath. "But I mean them anyway." She studied his face. The genuine remorse etched into every line, the vulnerability in his eyes that she'd never seen 5 years ago. He looked human. Not the untouchable duke, not the arrogant aristocrat who dismissed her with a single word. Just a man, flawed and uncertain and trying. "Good night, Your Grace," she said. "Alaric, please call me Alaric." "I'm not ready for that yet." "When will you be?" "I don't know. Maybe never." She opened the door and stepped inside, but before she closed it, she looked back at him. "Thank you," she said softly. "For the room, the flowers, for trying." And then she closed the door, leaving Alaric standing alone in the hallway, his heart hammering, his mind racing. 1 day down, 13 to go. He could do this. He had to. Inside her room, Seraphine pressed her back against the door and closed her eyes. Her heart was racing, her hands were shaking, and despite everything, despite all her walls, all her careful defenses, she felt something dangerous unfurling in her chest. Hope. Damn him. Damn him for making her hope. She crossed to the window and looked out at the gardens, now silvered by moonlight. Somewhere out there, in the dark, was the fountain where she used to sit and read. Where she used to hide from a world that didn't see her. She wasn't hiding anymore, but she wasn't sure she was brave enough to be seen. Not by him. Not like this. She touched the glass, feeling the cool surface against her palm. 2 weeks. She just had to survive 2 weeks, and then she could go back to her carefully constructed life, back to safety, back to being alone but protected. But as she stood there in the moonlight, surrounded by luxury she'd never imagined 5 years ago, Seraphine realized something terrifying. She didn't want to be alone anymore. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. The morning came too early and too bright. Seraphine woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of birds singing in the gardens. For a disoriented moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory returned in a rush. Ashford Manor, the house party. Alaric standing in the hallway, looking at her like she was something precious he'd lost and found again. She pressed her palms to her eyes and groaned. A soft knock at the door made her sit up. "Miss," Lucy's voice came through. "His Grace has arranged a riding party this morning. He asked me to see if you'd like to join." Seraphine's first instinct was to refuse, but then she remembered Cassius's words. "You'll never be free of it if you don't face him." "Tell His Grace I'll be down in half an hour," she called. She heard Lucy's footsteps retreating down the hall. Seraphine threw back the covers and moved to the wardrobe where her riding habit hung. It was new, purchased in London before she'd left. Deep blue wool with silver buttons, elegant but practical. Armor, she thought, just like the evening gown. She dressed carefully, pinning her hair back in a style that would survive wind and movement. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw someone who looked confident, composed. She just needed to believe it. The stables were a short walk from the main house, tucked behind a line of ancient oaks. Seraphine could hear voices and laughter as she approached. The other guests were already there, gathered around while grooms led horses out of stalls. Alaric stood at the center, dressed in riding clothes that made him look like something out of a painting. Dark trousers. Black boots polished to a mirror shine. A white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing tanned forearms. He looked up the moment she rounded the corner. Their eyes met. and Seraphine felt that now familiar flutter in her chest, the one she kept trying to ignore. "Miss Caldwell," Alaric said, moving toward her, "I'm glad you decided to join us." Lord Montrose insisted. It was a lie. Cassius was still at the house, claiming he had correspondence to attend to. But Alaric didn't need to know that. Did he? Something flickered in Alaric's expression. "Well, we're grateful for his insistence." He turned toward the stables. "William, bring out Moonstone." A groom disappeared and returned moments later, leading a grey mare with intelligent eyes and a coat that shimmered like silver in the morning light. "This is Moonstone," Alaric said. "She's gentle but spirited. I thought she might suit you." Seraphine approached the mare slowly, offering her hand. Moonstone sniffed delicately, then nudged her palm. "She's beautiful," Seraphine said softly. "Yes." Alaric's voice was quiet. "She is." When Seraphine looked up, he wasn't looking at the horse. He was looking at her. Heat crept up her neck. "Shall we?" Theo called from across the yard. He was already mounted on a bay gelding, looking far too cheerful for the early hour. "The morning's wasting, and Lady Eleanor has threatened to leave without us." "No one is leaving without anyone," Lady Eleanor said from atop a chestnut mare, "but I would like to reach the lake before noon." They set out in a loose group, moving through the formal gardens and out onto the open grounds beyond. The morning was perfect. Clear sky, gentle breeze, the kind of English summer day that made you forget how many months of rain had led to it. Seraphine let Moonstone find her pace, settling into the rhythm of the ride. It had been months since she'd ridden, but her body remembered. The slight forward lean, the give and take with the reins, the way you had to become part of the horse rather than simply sitting on top of it. "You ride well." She turned her head. Alaric had maneuvered his black stallion, a magnificent beast that looked like it had been carved from midnight, alongside her. "I told you, the family in Florence kept horses." "Did you ride alone?" "Sometimes. When Juliana was ill or studying. The father, Signor Medici, said it was good for me, that I looked less haunted when I came back from rides." "Haunted?" Seraphine regretted the word immediately. "I meant tired." "No, you didn't. You meant haunted." Alaric was quiet for a moment. "What haunted you, Seraphine?" The use of her given name sent a shiver through her. She should correct him, maintain the distance. But something about the morning, the openness of the land, the privacy of the conversation while the others rode ahead, made her honest. "You did," she said quietly. "For a long time, you did." Alaric's hand tightened on the reins. His horse tossed its head, sensing the tension. "And now?" he asked. "Now I'm trying to decide if you're still a ghost or if you're real." "I'm real." "Are you? Or are you just playing a role, the reformed rake, the repentant nobleman? How do I know this isn't just another performance?" "You don't." He guided his horse closer, close enough that their legs almost brushed. "You can't know. Not yet. All you can do is watch. See if my actions match my words. And if they don't, then you were right about me. And I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I had a second chance and wasted it." The raw honesty in his voice made her chest ache. "Why does this matter so much to you?" she asked. "Why now, after 5 years? Do you want the truth?" "Always." Alaric took a breath. "Because for 5 years I've been walking through my life like a ghost, going through the motions, running estates, attending parliament, doing everything a duke is supposed to do. And I was good at it, successful even. But I felt nothing. Everything was grey, muted. And then I saw you at that ball, and it was like someone had turned the colour back on, like I could breathe again for the first time in years." "That's not fair," Seraphine whispered. "I know. You can't put that on me. The responsibility for your happiness." "I'm not. I'm just being honest about what happened. You asked why it matters. That's why." They rode in silence for a moment. Ahead, Theo and Lady Eleanor were racing, their laughter carrying back on the wind. The Pembertons had stopped to examine some geological formation, completely absorbed in their own world. It was just the two of them, alone in a landscape of green hills and endless sky. "Do you remember the library?" Alaric asked suddenly. "Of course." You spent hours there. I used to wonder what you were reading, what made you look so absorbed. I told you, poetry, history, anything that took me somewhere else. I should have asked, should have sat down and talked to you, found out what you loved, what made you laugh. He paused. I should have seen you, but you didn't. No, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. He looked at her, his grey eyes intense. But I see you now, and I'm asking, begging, for the chance to know you, the real you, not the frightened girl from 5 years ago, the woman you've become. Seraphine's throat was tight. What do you want to know? Everything. The word came out fierce. What's your favorite book? What makes you laugh? What do you think about when you can't sleep? What are you afraid of? What do you dream about? That's a lot of questions. We have 2 weeks. I'll ask them all eventually. Despite herself, Seraphine smiled. Persuasion. What? My favorite book. It's Persuasion by Jane Austen. The story of Anne Elliot who lost her love and found him again years later, both of them changed by time and experience. Ah, Alaric's lips curved. Is that what you're hoping for? A story like that? I'm not hoping for anything, I'm just answering your question. Liar. Excuse me? You're lying. Everyone hopes for something, even when they're afraid to admit it. Seraphine pulled Moonstone to a stop. Alaric did the same, turning his stallion to face her. What are you hoping for? She asked, challenging him. And don't say me. Don't make this about winning me back like I'm some prize to be claimed. I'm hoping, Alaric said slowly, carefully, for the chance to earn your trust. I'm hoping that at the end of these 2 weeks, you'll look at me and see someone worthy of knowing, someone worthy of your time. I'm hoping that maybe, you'll give me permission to court you properly, to write you letters, to call on you, to prove over months or years or however long it takes that I've changed. That's what I'm hoping for. The honesty in his words threatened to undo her. And if I can't give you that, then I'll accept it. I'll let you go, and I'll be grateful for these 2 weeks, for the chance to know you at all. Seraphine stared at him. At the Duke of Ashford, sitting astride his horse in the morning sunlight, looking at her with such naked vulnerability that it hurt to witness. This was dangerous. He was dangerous. Not because he would hurt her intentionally, but because he was making her want things she'd taught herself not to want. We should catch up with the others, she said finally. Alaric nodded. Of course. But as they urged their horses forward, he added quietly, for what it's worth, my favorite book is Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, the philosophy of accepting what you can't control and focusing on what you can. I've been reading it a lot lately. And has it helped? No, because the one thing I want to control, your opinion of me, is entirely beyond my reach. Before Seraphine could respond, he'd urged his stallion into a canter, moving ahead to join the others, leaving her alone with her thoughts and a heart that was beating far too fast. They reached the lake an hour later. It was a small body of water, more pond than lake really, but it was beautiful, surrounded by willows and wildflowers, with a small dock extending out over the water. The party dismounted, letting the horses graze while servants who'd arrived earlier set up a picnic on blankets spread across the grass. Seraphine found a spot near the water's edge, far enough from the others to have a moment of peace. She was watching dragonflies skim across the surface when footsteps approached behind her. May I? She turned. Theo stood there, holding 2 glasses of lemonade and wearing an expression that was far more serious than his usual irreverent grin. Of course, Seraphine said. He sat beside her and handed her a glass. They drank in comfortable silence for a moment. He's in love with you, you know, Theo said finally. Seraphine nearly choked on her lemonade. What? Alaric, he's in love with you. Has been for 5 years, though he's only just figured it out. That's absurd. Is it? I've known him since we were boys, Miss Caldwell. I've seen him with countless women. I've seen him flirt and charm and seduce. But I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. He barely knows me. That's not true. He knew you 5 years ago. He was just too much of an idiot to realize what he had. Theo turned to face her. Look, I'm not telling you this to pressure you. Lord knows you've been pressured enough. I'm telling you because I think you deserve to know what you're dealing with. That man would burn down the world for a chance to make you happy. And if you decide you don't want that, if you decide he doesn't deserve it, then fine, walk away. But don't walk away because you don't think he's serious. He's never been more serious about anything in his life. Seraphine's hands were shaking. I don't know if I can trust him, she whispered. Then don't. Not yet. Make him earn it. Make him prove it. But give him the chance to try. Because I think you'll regret it if you don't. How can you be so sure? Because I saw your face during the ride, the way you looked at him when you thought no one was watching. You're just as terrified as he is, just as hopeful, just as desperate for this to be real. Tears pricked at Seraphine's eyes. I don't want to be hurt again, she said. I know, but sometimes the things worth having are the things that scare us most. He stood, brushing grass from his trousers. Think about it, Miss Caldwell. You've got 2 weeks. That's enough time to figure out if he's worth the risk. He walked back toward the others, leaving Seraphine alone with her thoughts and her racing heart. The ride back to the manor was quieter. Everyone was tired, content, sun-warmed and pleasantly exhausted from the morning. Alaric rode at the front with Lord Pemberton, discussing something about crop rotations, but every few minutes he would glance back, just a brief look, just enough to make sure she was still there. And every time he did, Seraphine felt something shift inside her. Some wall she'd built so carefully beginning to crack. She was in so much trouble. That evening, after dinner, Seraphine found herself in the library. She hadn't planned to come here, had intended to retire early to her room, but her feet had carried her here anyway, to this room where she'd once hidden from the world. It looked the same, smelled the same, books and leather and old paper. She ran her fingers along the spines, reading titles in the dim lamplight. I thought I might find you here. She spun around. Alaric stood in the doorway, still dressed for dinner, his cravat slightly loosened. I'm sorry, I should have asked permission. This is your library too, Alaric said, stepping inside. You don't need permission. It's your house. It's a library. It belongs to anyone who loves books. He moved closer. Did you find what you were looking for? I wasn't looking for anything. I just needed to be somewhere quiet. Was dinner too much? No. Everyone was lovely. She trailed off. How could she explain that she'd needed to come here? To this room where she'd once felt safe? I understand, Alaric said quietly. Sometimes crowds are exhausting. Even small ones. He crossed to a shelf and pulled down a leather-bound volume. This is the book I was looking for that day, he said. When I found you in here 5 years ago, do you remember? Yes, Vegetius. You remembered. I remember everything from that day. Alaric opened the book, but Seraphine could tell he wasn't really seeing it. I've been thinking about that moment a lot, he said. The way you told me exactly where to find what I was looking for, like you'd catalogued the entire library. I should have realized then, should have seen how extraordinary you were. I'm not extraordinary. Yes, you are. And the fact that you don't see it makes you even more so. He set the book down and turned to face her fully. Seraphine, can I ask you something? Yes. Why did you really come back to England? The question caught her off guard. She could lie, give him the same answer she'd given at dinner, but something about this room, this space that had once been her sanctuary, made her honest. Because I was tired of running, she said. Because I realized that no matter how far I went, I was still carrying you with me, and I needed to come back and face that, face you, so I could finally let it go. And can you let it go? Seraphine looked at him, at the hope and fear warring in his expression. I don't know yet, she said honestly. Ask me again in 13 days. Alaric smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger, lighter. 13 days, he repeated. I can work with that. And for the first time since she'd arrived at Ashford Manor, Seraphine found herself smiling back. The next 3 days passed in a rhythm that Seraphine found both comforting and terrifying. Mornings were for riding or walking the grounds. Alaric always found a way to be near her, but never oppressively so. He didn't hover, he simply appeared. At the breakfast table with a cup of tea made exactly how she liked it. On the terrace with a book he thought she might enjoy. In the garden where she'd gone to escape the afternoon heat, he was courting her. The realization had struck her on the third day, watching him across the lawn as he played croquet with the other guests. He'd looked up, found her instantly among the small crowd, and smiled. Not the practiced smile of a duke performing for society, but something real. Something that made her chest ache. He was courting her the way he should have 5 years ago, and God help her. It was working. Cassius had noticed, of course. "You're softening," he'd said that morning over breakfast. "I am not. You smiled at him yesterday. A real smile. Not one of those polite, distant things you've been giving him. I was being civil. You were being smitten. Cassius, I'm not judging, Seraphine. I'm just observing. And what I'm observing is that your walls are coming down, which is either wonderful or terrifying, depending on whether he deserves it. And what do you think? Does he deserve it?" Cassius had been quiet for a long moment. "I think he's trying. Really trying. Whether that's enough is something only you can decide." The evening of the fourth day brought rain. Not the gentle English drizzle that Seraphine had grown accustomed to, but a proper storm. Thunder that shook the windows. Lightning that turned the sky white. Rain that hammered against the glass like it was demanding entry. Dinner had been moved to the smaller dining room, and afterward the party had scattered. The Pembertons to their rooms to read, Lady Eleanor to write letters, Theo to the billiards room with Cassius. Seraphine had intended to retire early, but sleep felt impossible with the storm raging outside, so she'd found herself wandering the corridors, eventually ending up, inevitably, in the library. She'd lit a few lamps and settled into the window seat with a book of poetry. But she couldn't concentrate. The words blurred together, meaningless. Her mind kept drifting to Alaric, to the way he'd looked at her during dinner, to the way his hand had brushed hers when he'd passed her the salt, and how the brief contact had sent electricity up her arm. To the way he'd said her name that morning, soft, almost reverent, when he'd found her in the garden. She was in trouble. Deep, dangerous trouble. Because despite everything, despite 5 years of walls and defenses and carefully constructed independence, she was falling for him. Again. Or maybe still. Maybe she'd never stopped. The door opened. Seraphine looked up. Alaric stood in the doorway, his hair damp from the rain, his shirt clinging to his shoulders. He looked surprised to see her. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't realize anyone was here. I'll go—" "No." The word came out before she could stop it. "Stay. Please." He hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes." He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The click of the latch seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet library. Alaric crossed to the fireplace and stood there for a moment, staring into the flames. "I couldn't sleep," he said finally. "The storm. Me neither. I used to love storms when I was a boy. My father hated them, said they were disruptive, inconvenient, but I thought they were magnificent. All that power, all that chaos. It felt honest somehow. And now? Now they make me think of the night you left." Seraphine's breath caught. Alaric turned to face her. "It was storming that night. Just like this. Thunder and lightning and rain that wouldn't stop. I stood at my window and watched you walk down the drive with your trunk. Watched you disappear into the dark. And I told myself I was doing the right thing. Letting you go. Respecting your choice. You were. No. I was being a coward." He moved closer, his expression raw. "I should have run after you. Should have stopped you, should have told you." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I should have told you the truth." "What truth?" "That I was terrified. That I'd just lost my father and inherited a title I didn't want and a fortune that came with more debts than I knew how to handle. That I was drowning and didn't know how to ask for help. That when I looked at you, I saw someone who was brave enough to leave, brave enough to choose herself, and I envied that. Hated you a little for having that courage when I didn't." Seraphine stood slowly. "Alaric, let me finish, please." His hands were shaking. She could see it even from across the room. "I called you plain because it was easier than admitting the truth, that you terrified me. That when you looked at me with those two honest eyes, I felt seen in a way I'd never been seen before. And I didn't know what to do with that. So I dismissed you, pushed you away, made you feel small so I could feel in control. Thunder cracked outside, rattling the windows. And then you left, and I realized what I'd done, what I'd lost. But by then it was too late. You were gone. And I spent 5 years trying to find you, trying to forget you, trying to understand how I'd become the kind of man who could look at someone extraordinary and see nothing. You're not that man anymore, Seraphine whispered. How can you be sure? Because that man wouldn't be standing here telling me the truth. That man wouldn't have spent 2 weeks trying to prove he'd changed. That man wouldn't look at me the way you're looking at me right now. And how am I looking at you? Like I'm the only thing in the world that matters. The space between them felt charged, electric. Alaric took a step forward, then another. You are, he said roughly, the only thing that matters. The only thing that's mattered for 5 years. I just didn't realize it until it was too late. It's not too late. The words escaped before Seraphine could think them through. But once they were out, she couldn't take them back, didn't want to take them back. Alaric stopped, his eyes searching hers. What are you saying? I'm saying, she took a breath. I'm saying that I came here expecting to hate you, expecting to prove to myself that I was over you. That what happened 5 years ago didn't matter anymore, but I can't, because it does matter, you matter, and that terrifies me more than anything. Why? Because I don't know if I'm strong enough to survive losing you again. You won't lose me. Not this time. Not ever. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. He closed the remaining distance between them, close enough now that she could see the gold flecks in his grey eyes, could feel the heat radiating from him. I can promise that I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you. I can promise that I will never take you for granted, never make you feel invisible, never let you doubt that you are the most extraordinary person I've ever known. Seraphine's eyes burned with tears. You're not playing fair. I don't care about fair. I care about you. Alaric, I love you. The words came out fierce, desperate. I love you, Seraphine. I've loved you for 5 years without knowing it. And now that I do know it, I can't pretend anymore. I can't play it safe. I love you. And if you tell me right now that you could never love me back, I'll accept it. I'll let you go. But I need you to know. I need you to hear it. I love you. The tears spilled over. Seraphine had spent 5 years building walls, 5 years teaching herself not to hope, not to want, not to believe in fairy tales or second chances. But standing here looking at this man who had once broken her heart and was now offering her his own, she felt every one of those walls crumble to dust. I don't want to love you, she whispered. I know. I don't want to give you the power to hurt me again. I know. But I do. God help me, I do love you. I think I never stopped. The words hung between them for one perfect crystalline moment. And then Alaric was moving, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that made her heart ache. Say it again, he breathed. I love you. Again. I love you, Alaric. He rested his forehead against hers, and Seraphine felt his whole body shuddering with relief. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for giving me another chance. Thank you for being brave enough to hope. Thank you for... She kissed him, not gently, not tentatively, but with 5 years of longing and heartbreak and desperate, terrifying hope. His arms came around her immediately, pulling her close, eliminating every inch of space between them. One hand cradled the back of her head, while the other pressed against the small of her back, holding her like she was precious, breakable, sacred. The kiss was everything. Desperation and relief and apology and promise, all tangled together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alaric kept his arms around her. I'm not letting go, he said. Good. I mean it. Ever. You're stuck with me now. Despite everything, the tears, the emotion, the overwhelming intensity of the moment, Seraphine laughed. You're very presumptuous, Your Grace. I prefer confident. He pulled back just enough to look at her. Marry me. Seraphine froze. What? Marry me? I know it's too soon. I know we should court properly for months. Do everything the right way. But I've wasted 5 years already, and I don't want to waste another moment, so marry me. Please. Alaric, you don't have to answer now. Take time, think about it. But know that I'm asking, that I want you, not as my mistress, not as some secret, but as my wife, my duchess, my partner in everything. Seraphine's heart was hammering so hard she could barely hear over the sound of it. This was insane, reckless, everything she'd told herself she wouldn't do. But looking at Alaric, at the hope and fear and love shining in his eyes, she realized something. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was trust. Ask me again at the end of the 2 weeks, she said. Why? Because I want to be sure, and I want you to be sure. No doubts, no questions, just certainty. Alaric studied her face, then nodded slowly. All right, the end of 2 weeks. I can wait that long. He pulled her close again, tucking her head under his chin. But know that my answer won't change. In 6 days or 6 months or 6 years, I'll still be standing here, asking you to be mine. And what if I say no? Then I'll ask again the next day, and the day after that, until eventually you get so tired of me asking that you say yes just to shut me up. Seraphine laughed against his chest, feeling the vibration of his own laughter rumbling through him. Outside, the storm raged on. But in the library, wrapped in Alaric's arms, Seraphine felt something she hadn't felt in 5 years. Safe, loved, home. They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other, not speaking, just breathing together, while the rain hammered against the windows and the fire crackled in the hearth. Eventually, Alaric pulled back slightly. I should let you get some sleep. I don't want to sleep. Neither do I. But if I keep you here much longer, I'll do something foolish like refuse to ever let you leave this room. That doesn't sound so terrible. His eyes darkened. Don't tempt me, Seraphine. The way he said her name, rough and wanting, sent heat through her veins. I should go, she said, but didn't move. You should. In a moment. In a moment. Neither of them moved. Then Alaric leaned down and kissed her again. Soft this time, achingly tender. 6 more days, he murmured against her lips. 6 more days. I can be patient. Can you? No, but I'll try. For you. Seraphine smiled and pulled away, already missing the warmth of him. Good night, Alaric. Good night, my love. She walked to the door, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. At the threshold, she looked back. He stood by the fire, watching her with an expression that made her knees weak. Alaric? Yes? Ask me again. At the end of 2 weeks, I think... She swallowed. I think I might say yes. His smile was blinding. I'm counting on it. Seraphine floated back to her room. There was no other word for it. Her feet barely touched the ground. Her heart was racing. Her mind was spinning. Alaric loved her. He'd said it, out loud, without hesitation. And she'd said it back. She'd meant it. God help her, she'd meant every word. When she reached her room, Cassius was waiting in the hallway. He took one look at her face, at her kiss, swollen lips and dazed expression, and smiled. So, he said, I take it the evening went well? He loves me. I know. He asked me to marry him. I expected as much. I think I'm going to say yes. Cassius pulled her into a hug. Good. Because you deserve to be happy, Seraphine, and that man, for all his faults, will move heaven and earth to make you happy. I'm terrified. That means it's real. She pulled back and looked at her friend. Thank you. For everything. For bringing me back to England. For pushing me to face this. For being here. Always. He kissed her forehead. Now go to sleep. Dream about your Duke. And tomorrow we'll start planning how to torture him for the next 6 days. Seraphine laughed and slipped into her room. She fell asleep with a smile on her face, and Alaric's words echoing in her mind. I love you, I love you, I love you. The next morning brought clarity and chaos in equal measure. Seraphine woke with her heart still full of the previous night. The confession, the kiss, The promise of 6 more days before everything changed. She dressed quickly, eager to see Alaric, to confirm that last night had been real and not some fever dream conjured by storm and longing. But when she descended to breakfast, the atmosphere in the house had shifted. The servants moved with unusual urgency, voices carried from the entrance hall, and Cassius sat at the breakfast table alone, his expression grim. "What's happened?" Seraphine asked, sliding into the chair beside him. "The Dowager Duchess arrived an hour ago." Seraphine's blood went cold. "What?" "Alaric's mother. She returned from Bath unexpectedly. Something about hearing rumors of the house party and deciding she needed to be present." Cassius's jaw tightened. "She's been closeted with Alaric in his study for the past 30 minutes. Does she know I'm here?" "Oh, she knows. One of the footmen mentioned the guest list. Her expression when she heard your name was..." He paused. "Let's just say she wasn't pleased." Seraphine's hands trembled. She set down her teacup before she could drop it. 5 years ago, the Dowager had made her feel like nothing, like an inconvenience, a problem to be solved. And now she was back. "Seraphine," Cassius reached for her hand, "you're not that girl anymore. Remember that. You're not powerless. You're not alone. And this time, Alaric is on your side." "Is he? Or will he choose his mother, his duty, everything I can't give him?" "Don't do that. Don't spiral before you even know what's happening." But Seraphine's mind was already racing. The Dowager would never approve of her, never accept a penniless nobody as the next Duchess of Ashford. She would do everything in her considerable power to stop this. And Alaric, he'd said he loved her. But love and duty were different things. When forced to choose between his heart and his title, which would win? The study door opened an hour later. Seraphine was in the drawing room with the other guests, pretending to read while her mind spun in circles, when Alaric appeared in the doorway. He looked exhausted, strained. His cravat was loose and his hair disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes found hers immediately. "Miss Caldwell, might I have a word?" The formal address sent ice through her veins. She stood on shaking legs and followed him into the hallway. He didn't stop at his study. Instead, he led her outside through the gardens, not speaking until they reached the fountain where she'd once sat alone in the early mornings. "My mother knows," he said without preamble. "I heard she arrived. She's displeased." Seraphine laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "I imagine she is. She said things about you, about us. Things I won't repeat because they were cruel and untrue, and..." He stopped, took a breath. "I told her to leave." Seraphine's heart stuttered. "What?" "I told her that if she couldn't treat you with respect, she wasn't welcome in my home, that I wouldn't tolerate her cruelty. That you were..." His voice roughened. "That you were going to be my wife, and she would either accept that or remove herself from my life." "Alaric..." She refused, said I was making a mistake, that I was throwing away my legacy for a nobody, that I would regret this for the rest of my life. He turned to face her fully. So I asked her to pack her things and return to Bath. Tears burned Seraphine's eyes. "You sent your mother away?" "Yes. For me. For us. For the future I want. For the life I refuse to live without you in it. She'll never forgive you. I don't care. Alaric, she's your mother. Your family. I won't be the reason you lose that." He stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face. "You're not the reason. Her cruelty is the reason. Her inability to see past titles and bloodlines is the reason. You are the best thing that's ever happened to me, Seraphine. And if choosing you means losing her approval, then I choose you every single time. What if you regret it?" "I won't. You don't know that." "Yes, I do. Because I've already lived a life without you and it was empty. Meaningless. I was going through the motions, playing the part, but I wasn't alive. Not really." His thumbs brushed away the tears on her cheeks. "You make me want to be better, to do better. You see me, really see me, and you don't flinch. You challenge me. You make me laugh, you make me hope. How could I ever regret choosing that? Your mother said I was nobody. My mother is wrong. You're everything." More tears fell. happy and sad and overwhelming all at once. "I'm so afraid," Seraphine whispered. "Of what?" "That this is too good to be real, that I'll wake up and it will all have been a dream, that something will happen to take you away from me. Then I'll spend every day proving it's real. I'll be there when you wake up. And nothing will take me away from you. Not my mother, not society, not duty, nothing." He leaned down and kissed her. Soft, reverent, a promise sealed with touch. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. "The 2 weeks aren't up yet. We still have 5 more days, but I can't wait anymore, Seraphine. I need to know. Will you marry me? Will you be my duchess, my partner, my love for the rest of my life?" Seraphine's heart was so full she could barely breathe. All her life she'd been told she wasn't enough, wasn't pretty enough, wasn't wealthy enough, wasn't important enough. But Alaric looked at her like she was the sun and the moon and every star in the sky, like she was more than enough, like she was everything. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you. I'll be your duchess, your partner, your love. Yes to all of it. Yes to everything." The smile that broke across Alaric's face was incandescent. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her in a circle while she laughed. A real laugh, joyous and free and full of all the hope she'd been too afraid to feel. When he set her down, he kissed her again. Deeper this time, less careful. His hands slid into her hair, scattering pins. Her arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer. The world narrowed to this, to them, to the feeling of finally being home. They returned to the house hand in hand. The other guests were gathered in the drawing room when they entered. Cassius looked up first, his eyes widening at their joined hands and matching smiles. "Well," he said, grinning, "I take it congratulations are in order?" "She said yes," Alaric announced, his voice ringing with pride and joy. "Seraphine has agreed to be my wife." The room erupted. Lady Eleanor clapped her hands together. "Oh, how wonderful!" Theo crossed the room to clasp Alaric's shoulder. "About bloody time." Even the Pembertons looked up from their books long enough to offer warm congratulations. Cassius pulled Seraphine into a tight hug. "I'm so happy for you," he murmured. "You deserve this. All of it." "Thank you," she whispered back. "For everything. For bringing me home. You brought yourself home. I just gave you a push in the right direction." The rest of the day passed in a blur of celebration. Alaric sent word to London immediately, requesting a special license. "I'm not waiting months for bans to be read," he'd said firmly. "I've waited long enough." Plans were made, letters written, the house party transformed into an engagement celebration. And through it all, Alaric never left Seraphine's side. His hand found hers constantly, under the table during luncheon, in the garden when they walked, in the drawing room as they listened to Lady Eleanor play the pianoforte, like he needed the physical reassurance that she was real, that she was his. That evening after dinner, Alaric pulled her aside. "Come with me. I want to show you something." He led her upstairs past the guest rooms to a wing of the house she'd never explored. "These are the family apartments," he explained. "My rooms. And..." He stopped in front of a large door. "The Duchess's suite." He opened the door. The room beyond was beautiful, spacious and elegant, decorated in soft colors that caught the evening light. There was a sitting area by the windows, a large bed with silk curtains, doors that led to a dressing room and private bath. "It's been empty since my grandmother died," Alaric said. "My mother never used it, said it was too old-fashioned. But I thought, if you wanted, we could redecorate, make it yours, whatever you like, whatever makes you comfortable." Seraphine walked into the room, her fingers trailing over the furniture. This would be hers, this room, this house, this life. It felt surreal. "There's something else," Alaric said. He crossed to a portrait on the wall, an elegant woman in an emerald gown, her dark hair swept up, her eyes warm and intelligent. "My grandmother, the Dowager Duchess before my mother. She was extraordinary, kind, strong. She ran this estate better than my grandfather ever did. And she told me once before she died, that I should never marry for duty, that I should find someone who challenged me, who made me laugh, who saw past the title to the man underneath. He turned to Seraphine. She would have loved you. Tears pricked at Seraphine's eyes. I wish I could have known her. So do I. But I think she'd be happy, knowing I found you, knowing I didn't repeat my father's mistake of choosing duty over love. He pulled a small box from his pocket. This was hers. Inside was a ring, simple but beautiful, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds set in gold. I had it cleaned and resized. It's not much. I can get you something grander if you want. It's perfect, Seraphine breathed. Alaric took her hand and slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Seraphine Caldwell, soon to be Seraphine Devereux, Duchess of Ashford. He brought her hand to his lips. I love you. I will love you until my last breath. And I will spend every day making sure you never doubt it. I love you too, she whispered. So much it terrifies me. Good, because I plan on terrifying you with how much I love you for the next 60 years. She laughed through her tears. Only 60? I'm being conservative. It might be longer. He pulled her into his arms, and they stood there in what would become her room, holding each other as the sun set beyond the windows, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. This was real. This was happening. She was going to marry the Duke of Ashford, the man who had once broken her heart, the man who had spent 5 years regretting it, the man who had chosen her over duty, over his mother's approval, over everything. What are you thinking? Alaric murmured against her hair. That I can't believe this is my life. Believe it. Because I'm never letting you go. Good. Because I'm never leaving. 1 year later, the gardens at Ashford Manor had never looked more beautiful. Roses bloomed in every color imaginable, cream and blush and deep crimson. The fountains sparkled in the afternoon sun, and guests mingled on the lawn, dressed in their finest, celebrating the first anniversary of the Duke and Duchess of Ashford's wedding. Seraphine stood on the terrace, watching it all with a sense of contentment so deep it still sometimes surprised her. A year ago, she'd married Alaric in a ceremony that had scandalized some of London and delighted others. They'd kept it small, intimate, just the people who mattered. Cassius had walked her down the aisle. Theo had stood as Alaric's best man. And when Alaric had said his vows, his voice rough with emotion, his eyes never leaving hers, Seraphine had felt the last of her walls crumble completely. She was loved, she was chosen, she was home. The year since had been extraordinary. They'd traveled, Paris, Rome, Venice. All the places Seraphine had dreamed of seeing. Alaric had insisted, saying he wanted to give her the world. But always they'd returned here, to Ashford Manor, to the library where they'd fallen in love, to the gardens where Alaric proposed, to the life they were building together. It hadn't been perfect. There had been challenges, society gossip. The dowager's continued disapproval, though she'd eventually made tentative peace with them, if not full acceptance. The weight of running an estate this size, but they'd faced it together. And every night, Alaric had kept his promise. He'd made sure Seraphine never doubted that she was loved, that she was enough, that she was everything. There you are. Strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind. Seraphine leaned back against Alaric's chest, smiling as he pressed a kiss to her temple. Hiding from your own party, Your Grace? She teased. Our party. And I'm not hiding. I'm strategically retreating to be with my wife. We should get back to our guests. In a moment. I want you to myself first. She turned in his arms, looking up at the man she loved. He looked happy, truly happy. The haunted look that had shadowed his eyes for so long was gone, replaced by something light and warm and content. What? He asked, seeing her expression. Nothing. I'm just grateful. For all of this. For you. I'm the grateful one. You saved me, Seraphine. I think we saved each other. Perhaps. He leaned down to kiss her. Soft, sweet, full of promise. Have I told you today that I love you? Only 3 times. Then I'm behind schedule. I love you, I love you, I love you. There, that's better. Seraphine laughed. You're ridiculous. I'm yours. Yes, you are. From the lawn below, someone called for them. The cake was being served, toasts would be made. But for one more moment, the Duke and Duchess of Ashford stood on the terrace, wrapped in each other's arms, looking out at the life they'd built from the ashes of their past. A life of love, of partnership, of second chances and new beginnings. Ready? Alaric asked. Seraphine took his hand, her grandmother's ring, now her ring, catching the light. Ready. And together they walked down to join their guests. Together they faced their future. Together they were home. The end. Thank you for reading this story of second chances and slow burn love. If you loved watching Alaric and Seraphine find their way back to each other, subscribe for more epic romance tales.